There's a woman I've treated for almost 11 years now, 81 years old. Last spring, she flew to Denver by herself, hiked a flat trail with her granddaughter, and texted me a photo from the top of it, grinning, hiking poles in hand, like she'd just won something. That same week, I saw a man in my office, 78. Couldn't get out of his recliner without rocking himself forward 3 or 4 times first. His wife had to bring in his grocery bags from the car because his back wasn't cooperating that day. Same decade of life, same general health risks waiting around the corner for all of us. Completely different bodies, completely different lives, really. And I'll be honest with you, for a long time early in my career, I assumed that gap was mostly genetics, luck of the draw. Some families just age better, right? But after watching thousands of patients move through their 70s, 80s, even into their 90s, I started noticing something. It wasn't genetics doing most of the heavy lifting. It wasn't expensive supplements either, though plenty of people wish it were that simple. A pill you take once, and suddenly you're golfing at 85. It was habits. Small, almost boring, repeated daily habits. So today, I want to walk you through 6 of them. Things I see again and again in the patients who are still independent, still steady on their feet, still genuinely enjoying their lives in their late 70s and 80s. If you're already doing 4 of these, you're doing better than most people your age, and I mean that sincerely. If you're doing all 6, you may be in that small group, somewhere around the top 1%, who age in a way most people only hope for. And I'll tell you now, the 6th one surprises people. It has nothing to do with food or exercise. Some of my colleagues are skeptical when I bring it up, but the research behind it is some of the most compelling I've seen in years, and I've watched it play out in real patients more times than I can count. Before we get into it, I'm curious about something. Tell me your age and tell me what state or country you're watching from today. I read these comments genuinely, and they tell me a lot about who's actually out there listening. All right, let's start with the first one, because it's the one I personally use most often as a quick check on how someone's really doing. Habit number 1. They can stand up from a chair without using their hands. Now, that sounds almost too simple to matter, but think about what's actually happening in that movement. Your legs have to generate enough force to lift your entire body weight. Your core has to stabilize your spine so you don't pitch forward. Your inner ear and your nervous system have to coordinate balance the instant you're upright. It's a small movement, but it's asking 4 or 5 different systems in your body to work together instantly without you thinking about it. That's actually why physical therapists and geriatric doctors use it as an informal screening tool. We call it, somewhat clinically, the sit-to-stand test. If someone needs to use their arms, rock themselves forward, or push off their knees, that's telling us something about leg strength and balance that a blood test never will. I had a patient, Richard, 76, retired electrician, came in for an unrelated knee complaint, and almost as an afterthought, I asked him to stand up from the exam chair without using his hands. He couldn't do it, not even close. He was a little embarrassed, honestly. This was a man who used to climb ladders for a living. We started him on something simple, a sturdy, firm chair at home, not the soft recliner. That's actually working against you here because it swallows you in and gives your legs nothing to push against. He'd sit down slow, controlled, then stand back up, arms crossed over his chest so he couldn't cheat with his hands. 5 repetitions, twice a day. That's it. 6 weeks later, he stood up in my office without even thinking about it. 6 months later, he told me he'd started doing it 10 times in a row, just because he wanted to see if he could. Now, I want to be fair here. Not everyone progresses at Richard's pace, and that's completely normal. If you have significant arthritis or a recent surgery, talk to your doctor before pushing this one. But for most people, this is one of the safest, simplest strength tests you can practice in your own living room. No equipment, no gym membership, no excuses about the weather. Which brings me to the second habit, because if the first one is about getting up, the second one is about what you do once you're up. Habit number 2, they walk every single day. Not occasionally, not when the weather's nice, daily. I tell my patients walking is probably the closest thing we have to a miracle drug, except it's free and nobody's trying to sell it to you on television at 11 at night. It moves blood through vessels that, frankly, get a little lazy with age. Think of them almost like old garden hoses, still functional, but they work better when there's regular pressure moving through them. Walking does that. It also seems to support brain health in ways researchers are still mapping out, likely through improved blood flow and certain proteins released during movement. I'm not talking about marathons here. 20 to 30 minutes, most days of the week, at a pace where you could hold a conversation, but you'd notice if you tried to sing. If the weather outside is uncooperative, and depending where you live, half the year it might be, walking laps around a mall, a big box store, even hallways at home works just fine. After dinner is a particularly good time, by the way. A short walk after eating can help with blood sugar control, something a lot of people don't realize. Margaret, one of my patients, 83, told me she started walking to her mailbox and back twice a day after her husband passed, mostly because the house felt too quiet and she needed a reason to get outside. Within a year, that turned into walking around her block. 2 years later, she was doing a mile most mornings with a neighbor she'd met along the way. She told me, almost offhand, that the walk had become the best part of her day. Not because of the exercise, really, but because of the company she found doing it. Rest days matter too, by the way. Your body needs recovery, especially if you're adding new activity. But movement, consistently, most days, that's the thread running through nearly every genuinely independent 80-year-old I treat. Now let's talk about something most people don't think about nearly enough. Habit number 3. Eating enough protein. Here's how I explain this to patients, because the science can sound dry if I'm not careful. Think of your muscle mass like a retirement account. In your 30s and 40s, you're not really paying attention to the balance. It just sort of sits there. But starting around age 60, without enough deposits going in, that account starts quietly shrinking. We call it sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss, and it speeds up if you're not eating enough protein and staying active to match it. The tricky part is it's invisible until it isn't. You don't notice the muscle disappearing day to day. You notice it when the jar lid won't budge, when the stairs feel steeper than they used to, when standing up from the floor after gardening becomes its own small project. The fix isn't complicated, though it does take intention. Eggs at breakfast, fish a few times a week, chicken, beans, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. These are accessible, affordable sources most people can work into meals they already enjoy. A simple breakfast might be 2 eggs with a small bowl of Greek yogurt on the side. Lunch could be a chicken salad with chickpeas mixed in. It doesn't need to be complicated or expensive. I had a patient, George, who told me he basically ate toast for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, mostly bread and not much else, for years. We added eggs in the morning and a palm-sized piece of fish or chicken at dinner. Nothing dramatic. Within several months, his grip strength, which we measure with a simple device, had genuinely improved. He joked that he could finally beat his grandson at arm wrestling again. I'm not sure that part was entirely true, but he was proud of it, and honestly, so was I. Quick question for you. What's your favorite way to get protein in? Eggs, fish, beans, something else? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious what people actually enjoy eating, not just what they think they're supposed to eat. Now, before we move into the next 3, and I want to tell you now, these become even more important after 75, let me just pause and say thank you for sticking with me this far. If this is helpful, a like on the video genuinely helps other people find it, people who might need to hear exactly this. And if you'd like more conversations like this one, subscribing means you won't miss them. I share practical, evidence-based guidance most weeks aimed at helping people stay strong, independent, and steady through these decades. All right, the last 3. And the final one, I promise you, has nothing to do with diet or exercise. It might be the most powerful one on this entire list. Habit number 4, They train their balance on purpose every day. Most people assume balance just declines with age, and there's not much to be done about it. That's actually not quite true. Balance is closer to a skill than a fixed trait. It involves your inner ear, the muscles around your ankles and hips, your vision, and your nervous system's ability to react quickly when something shifts under you. Like any skill, it responds to practice. I recommend patients try a heel-to-toe walk down a hallway, hand near a wall just in case, standing on one foot near the kitchen counter while brushing your teeth, something you're already doing so it doesn't feel like a chore. 30 seconds per side, working up gradually. Always have something sturdy nearby to hold on to, especially when you're starting out. This isn't about pushing through wobbliness alone in your living room. One of my patients, Dorothy, started this after a near fall reaching for something in her pantry. 18 months later, she told me, almost casually, that she'd caught herself stumbling on uneven sidewalk and actually recovered instead of going down. She said it so matter-of-factly, but I remember sitting there thinking, that's exactly what we're working toward. Not perfection, just that one moment where your body knows what to do. Habit number 5. They never stop challenging their brain. We talk so much about legs and hearts in conversations about aging, and not nearly enough about this. Your brain, much like your muscles, responds to use. Learning something new, even something small, creates fresh connections between neurons, a concept researchers call neuroplasticity, and it doesn't disappear with age the way we once assumed it did. This could be crossword puzzles, sure. But it could also be learning to video call your grandkids, picking up a card game with friends, learning a few phrases of a new language, picking up an instrument you always meant to try. The specific activity matters less than the act of genuinely engaging with something unfamiliar. I had a patient, Walter, 80 years old, who decided, somewhat out of boredom, he admitted, to learn how to use a tablet so he could video call his great-granddaughter overseas. He fumbled through it for weeks, got frustrated more than once, called me convinced he'd broken it twice when he'd simply muted himself. But 6 months later, he was video calling her every Sunday, and he told me it had become the highlight of his week. His mind stayed sharp, not because he forced himself through some brain training app, but because he had a reason to keep learning. And that, actually, brings us to the final habit, the one I promised you. The emotional core of this whole conversation, really. Habit number 6. They wake up every single morning with a reason to. This is the one that surprises people, including some physicians I've worked alongside. We tend to think of healthy aging purely in physical terms, muscles, joints, blood vessels. But a growing body of research suggests that a strong sense of purpose is connected to better mood, more physical activity, lower rates of certain chronic conditions, and in some studies, even longer life expectancy. It makes a certain intuitive sense when you sit with it. If you wake up with nothing pulling you out of bed, getting up feels optional. If you wake up because your grandson has a baseball game, because your garden needs watering, because there's a volunteer shift at the church, because the dog is staring at you needing his walk, getting up isn't a decision anymore. It's just what you do. I think about a patient named Eleanor often, 79 years old, lost her husband of 52 years rather suddenly, and for about a year, she told me, she genuinely didn't see much point in mornings. She stopped cooking real meals, stopped going to her bridge club, just sort of existed. What changed things, she said, wasn't a medication or a doctor's lecture. It was her neighbor asking if she'd help watch her grandkids 2 afternoons a week while she worked. Eleanor said yes, mostly out of obligation, if she's honest. But within a few months, those 2 afternoons became the anchor of her entire week. She started cooking again, partly because the kids needed feeding. She started walking again because the kids wanted to go to the park. She told me, sitting in my office almost 2 years later, that those children had quite literally given her a reason to keep living a full life. Not metaphorically, she meant it plainly. That's purpose. It doesn't have to be grand. It rarely is, honestly. Gardening, grandchildren, a pet, church, a volunteer shift, mentoring someone younger, cooking for people you love. These are the threads that hold a week together and a life together more than people realize until they're missing. Now, alongside these 6, there are a few smaller habits worth mentioning because they tend to show up in the same patients. Staying genuinely hydrated, not just drinking when you happen to remember. And I know, some of you avoid water in the evening because you don't want to be up at 3 in the morning, but try shifting your intake earlier in the day instead of cutting it all together. Getting 7 to 8 hours of real, consistent sleep. And staying socially connected, because loneliness, we now understand, isn't just an emotional weight. It has measurable effects on the body, on inflammation, even on cognitive decline over time. None of this needs to be perfect. I'm not asking you to overhaul your entire life starting tomorrow morning. A simple rhythm works better than rigid perfection. Wake up, have some water, a gentle stretch, a protein-rich breakfast, a short walk if you can manage it. Through the day, stay moving where possible. Eat balanced meals. Practice a little balance work. Talk to someone you care about. In the evening, a lighter dinner, some gentle stretching, something relaxing, and a consistent bedtime your body can rely on. So let's bring this together. Standing up without your hands. Walking daily. Eating enough protein. Training your balance on purpose. Keeping your brain genuinely engaged. And waking up with a reason that matters to you. None of these are miracle habits. There's no single supplement, no secret exercise, no expensive program hiding behind any of them. It's simpler than that, and honestly, a little more demanding than that too, because it asks for consistency, repeated quietly, for years, not a burst of motivation that fades by February. Your body has carried you through decades now. Through raising children, through careers, through grief and celebration, and everything in between. It's earned a little patience and care in return, and I genuinely believe it's not too late to give it that, regardless of what your last birthday looked like. So tell me honestly, how many of these 6 are you already doing? Write the number, 1 through 6, in the comments below. I read every one, and I'd genuinely like to know where you're starting from. If this was helpful, a like goes a long way in helping someone else find this conversation. Subscribe if you'd like to keep learning alongside us here. And if there's another senior in your life, a sibling, an old friend, a parent, who could use a little encouragement today, send this their way. Sometimes all it takes is someone explaining things clearly for the first time. Next time, I want to talk about something that might surprise you. 5 common breakfast foods that may quietly be working against your legs every morning, even when you think you're eating healthy. I think you'll want to hear that one. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next conversation. Project Contentedward Morgan, created by you. Add PDFs, documents, or other text to reference in this project.